All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today's guest is Chief Dan Marshall from Fairfield PD. He has over 26 years experience on the job, and organizational wellness is something that is a real priority for him and his agency. So I'm really, really excited to have Chief Dan Marshall on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk. You have so many things that we've talked about offline that you're doing organizationally that I would love to dive into. But before we do that, I would love to give our listeners a little bit of background on you. You've been in this career for over 26 years. Can you give us a little snapshot of what those 26 years looked like for you?
Sure. I started as a reserve police officer in a different city for 1 year, and I was animal control, and then I came to Fairfield, and I've spent the majority of my sworn career in Fairfield. So I've worked a lot of different facets of the job. I started in patrol, eventually went to a street team where we dealt with all kinds of crazy stuff like gangs, narcotics, prostitution. Then went to undercover narcotics for a little bit. Um, Became a field training officer. Got to train a lot of officers in that time frame, which was very beneficial to see people in stressful times and challenging times where they're not sure they're going to make it or they're going to get washed out. Then I promoted to sergeant. As sergeant, I learned the value of working in crime prevention and community and how important community support is, not only on officers, but officers' wellness. Um, School resource officer for a short time, and then started our peer support program as a sergeant in 2010. And then during that time frame too, I was a crisis hostage negotiator for about 12 years, which also gave me a lot of insights in the mental health side. But probably the most critical was I started our homeless intervention team. And so that really gave me a real focus on mental health and the effects of mental health, not only just for the community that we're dealing with, but how that also affects our officers inside. Promoted to lieutenant, worked in investigations and patrol, promoted to captain, and thankfully had the opportunity to be chief of Fairfield, the place where I kind of started. And so I've been doing that for over 2.5 years now, and it's been a privilege and an honor to serve here in this community for sure.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. That's a lot. You did a lot of different roles in the 26 years. And I wanted to touch on one of the things that you said. You said the value of community support on your mental health. Can you dive into that a little bit? Because I'm interested to hear your perspective on that.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics, honestly.
Okay. Yeah.
It really is because we are very, very lucky here that we have a super supportive community and council. But that doesn't go without work, right? Like people will ask, man, why do you guys go to this? How do you guys keep up with these events? Every event matters. Like yesterday, I was at a Hindu Holi event where they're bringing in spring, right? And the importance is they're so proud and so happy, and they're so supportive of us and law enforcement being there. And so when you go through times like COVID, you go through times like the George Floyd crisis. We experienced so much communities coming out against the police. We didn't have that in Fairfield. We had the opposite. Like we would go walk into a Starbucks or a Pete's Coffee, and people would be like, "Hey, we support you. That's not Fairfield. We appreciate what you guys do." And we're very lucky here because we're probably one of, I think the last study I saw, we're the fourth most diverse city in California. So we already have a diverse population, a very diverse police department. And so, and because of all the community input and all the community interaction we have, we just don't get that same reaction. So how does that benefit um, the officer's wellness is that when they're out and people are like, "Hey, thank you for what you do. We appreciate you." When people are sold in signs that say all cops are bad and we're in our city, and people are like, "No, we still love you. We appreciate you. We value you." It gives them that different real perspective from what's on TV and what's all the drama versus what's really happening in the city they work in. So we've been very blessed through those times, but it does, like I said, it doesn't go without work. I tell our cops all the time, we have to make deposits into our bank of public trust regularly because on occasion there's withdrawals that come and withdrawals can be super impactful. And so we hope that there's enough deposits there to get us through. And we've been very lucky in that manner that we've had those experiences here. And so it helps them with the upbeatness. They realize they are valued and supported here, which is huge.
Yeah, and I can imagine that that is just one less thing that you have to worry about coming to work when you can go out there and feel like you have that support and it's not just all negativity all the time. And I know when we talked offline, there were a few things that you said, but you said like safety service and community. A lot of the things that you talked about when we talked originally was community and that relationship between police and the community and having that why behind, why do we serve, but also who do we serve? And so that was one of the big things that stuck out a lot when we had that conversation is like putting in that effort to make sure that, you're supporting the community and then in return, you're seeing that same community support back for you, which I think is great.
Oh, it's incredible. And just at that event yesterday, two of my officers were going as I was leaving, and it was funny because one of them, she sent me a picture of her hand it was all pink, and she's like, I don't know if this is gonna wash off, and we are kind of just chuckling about it. And but part of that, if you look up what that is, that culture is we're bringing in spring, so they throw like different colors at each other as they're out in the field just enjoying the springtime, right? And so it was neat to see. So our officers will participate in that kind of stuff as well, where they're not too cool to go and enjoy the cultures and different things of our communities. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I would imagine too that the flip side to that is when you do have an incident or a case that you're working on, you also have people who want to talk to you and
Correct.
help with that. So it also helps on that end of things too, I would imagine.
It does. It's funny because we don't have a thing called Shot Spotter or Raven from Flock, and the reason we don't is because people still call us.
Mm.
They believe in calling the police and they trust us, and we do a lot on social media for that to show them, hey, we're out in the community, but we're also doing real police work still. And it's been great. And I truly believe our community support to see cops go and give people hugs and smiles, and then 10 minutes later they could be at a major incident, shooting or something. But to have that filler of that void of people actually showing passion and compassion to our officers, I think is huge. And
Yeah.
it really does help the wellness, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that we talked about I kind of mentioned earlier was the why, like having a why, like why do you serve? And I would love to understand your why. And this could be in the context of wellness, because I can tell in talking to you that you're so passionate about what you do and why you do it and the wellness components of your organization. What do you think is that driving force for you? Was there like a specific event or accumulation of events, or is it the community? What is your why when it comes to what you do in the wellness?
It's funny, like why I became a police officer is something I wanted to do since I was a little kid, growing up in Phoenix, actually, where you are. So
Yeah.
it's just something I've always wanted to do. But as you dive into the job and you see the effects on people and being able to make a difference in their lives, I am truly still that guy that's like, why do I do it? Because I enjoy helping people, service driven. And I think that's super important. And so, as a leader of this organization, I try to push that back. Our values are safety, service, and community. And that piece is that's who we're here for, right? We're here to keep them safe. We're here to keep ourselves safe. We want to provide good service. I expect them to treat people like they would want their family treated. Kind of go back to the golden rule, right? And then the community is why we're here. It's who we're here for. As far as for the officers and wellness, they do such an incredible job every single day that if we're not supporting them, who is, right? And it goes back to that's why it's huge to have this community support too. Um, but we got to find ways to make a difference. When you see things like people, and I'm sure you've had others on here talk about suicide rates with police officers, and um, I mean, I was on a call once for a retired Seattle police officer wanted to kill herself, and we grabbed her and were able to secure her weapon that she had in her pocket, and I think it was going to be suicide by cop. We walked in her house. She had her dress uniform laid out. And when you see stuff like that, it's like, wow, like their why ended because their service piece ended.
Mhm.
Um, and then, so how do we build resiliency while they're working and help them, encourage them to find other things that have value in their lives? So it's not just this job. So I guess that's probably my why is just how do we make them better and give them opportunities, and just truly care about them, right? Like they're caring for everyone else, but who's caring for them oftentimes? And
This
so
is
it
this
it
is
is it is critical.
I agree. And this is, one of the many reasons why I love working with law enforcement is because everyone that I talk to has that same passion of helping others. I feel like it's at the core of who you are, and you don't meet a lot of communities who have that deep passion for helping others. And I think that it's incredible to have a community who like really, really, really at their core. But the reason why you got into this profession, which is not an easy profession by any means, is because you want to help other people. And I think that that's incredible. And that's something that should be um, spoken about more often, I think.
No, I agree, and I think as leaders of organizations, I don't care if you're in command staff or supervisor or whatever, um, our our why changes. It should shift a little bit to where we are no longer here to help the community as much as we're here to help our staff that are helping the community. And I think sometimes we get caught up in that as leadership, and our focus becomes me driven versus them driven.
Mm.
Uh, and so it's something that we have to keep ourselves in check on is how are we helping our department? Like how are we making their lives easier, less stressful, better? Because that is now who we serve, right? Obviously, a big picture, yes, I serve the city of Fairfield, but I truly serve the 200 employees that I have.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that because I do think a lot of times you'll hear kind of, I don't want to say resistance, but sometimes you will hear like, well, I wouldn't do that, or like that's not for me, so that it's not for everybody else. But to say like,
Right.
oh, it's not about you, it's about everyone else, and having that service of others mentality, I think is a good thing to keep in mind for leadership for sure. The one thing I want to ask you, because we know 26 years ago, was not what it is now.
Correct.
And you've seen a variety of roles and incidents within your career. And I know you talked about some of like the more crazy things, the, drugs and the gangs and the prostitution. What got you through that time from a wellness perspective, to be able to, process those things when there weren't resources available? How did you get through that to where you are now?
It's funny. I don't know that I knew back then, but I think when I started reading books like Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement or having Dr. Gil Martin speak, when you start hearing things like that, it's like, oh, that makes sense. I had four kids that were very active in sports. I had two boys and two girls, and both my boys played baseball and basketball, so I was coaching them when they were young. And then my daughters played softball and soccer and swam. So I think, and I coached some of them too. And even though I didn't know much about soccer, but I had to learn quickly. I think forcing yourself to doing the other things that really matter. And then I think just being able, one thing, I don't know how we've learned it over the years, but somehow we've compartmentalized really well. And so I think now we're learning, hey, we have to unpack some of that
Mm.
we've kind of buried. And I think back then, some of my coping were, hey, I'm going to go. I have baseball practice today. I got basketball practice next week. I've got games on the weekends. And so life was normal again. And I had, um, and some people may disagree with this, but I also had friends that weren't in law enforcement. Um, and I didn't talk about it when I was off duty. They would do the, hey, how's your job? And oh, not much going on. How's your job? And I would quickly flip the script to them and let them talk about their jobs, and I think that just kind of helped just kind of bury some of it, but you don't ever forget.
Mhm.
Um, there's still times I drive by a certain place or something will come up and I remember a call. And you don't forget. I remember walking into certain houses and I could still draw you the outline of the house if I was a good artist, but thankfully I'm not. But it's like, so things you just don't forget. But I think for me, I coped through my kids and my family, and we didn't talk about the job. And then even friends that were not cops, we didn't talk about the job. But then also on the job, talking about the job. And that doesn't make a lot of sense, but having debriefs, like going and BSing with somebody's after a call and saying, man, that was crazy, blah, 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 and you have those conversations. And back then we didn't know it was peer support, but it essentially was peer support. Having those, or we call them 98s at least here, and it's just like getting together after a call or going to have coffee and just BSing. That is essentially peer support, but we didn't call it that, and it wasn't cool to call it peer support. So we would just say that, right? And we didn't have the counseling and all that. And when we went to a psych, it was usually not a good thing back then. So I think you just learn to do it with your peers and get some of that off your back. But I think sometimes we've suffered a little bit from that. If you look historically, where I think the cops of today, um, they're a lot more ingrained in, hey, I'm willing to go to this critical incident debrief, or I'm willing to go to see counselor. So it's a lot different, which is good. It's a good thing. Hopefully they're not unpacking later on because they're unpacking now.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You said that people might disagree with you, having friends outside of the career and having that sense of like quote unquote normalcy. That's actually something that I've heard a lot as words of advice. I've heard a lot
Good,
of
good.
leadership say that. They're like, have a community outside of law enforcement that makes you feel like you not cop you. And so it sounds like you had that not just through friends, but also through like positive outlets, like being there with your kids and playing sports and having kind of that normal, I keep saying quote because like there, I don't know if
It
normal
is.
actually exists, but a sense of normalcy outside of the career. So that's actually a piece of advice that a lot of people say is like really, really positive. I don't know if there's a lot of people that would debate that. So it sounds like you found
That's
that
good.
naturally.
Glad that's out there. That's super good.
Yeah. And then that's interesting that you say, essentially what we were doing back then was peer support but like we didn't know it at the time, kind of seeking that support and having those conversations. Do you think that kind of the lack of support that you had and how you saw that impact, other people around you. Do you think that that has impacted the way that you lead now and the things that you try to offer now because you know what it was like to not really have it? Do you think that now that influences what you do today in this chief role?
Yeah, I think it does. I think we didn't have it, and trying to start the program, I know back in 2010, which doesn't seem like that long ago, um, it was challenging, and it was challenging to get buy-in. Um, and people be like, "I'm not talking to them," like it's a shrink thing versus like it's just having a conversation, right? It's just having someone to have an outlet for. And maybe they've been through what you're going through, and maybe they can help you with coping mechanisms. And hey, this is how we had to do it. And so I think it is important, and we didn't have that really back then, and we didn't have that support. Um, I think it does make a difference, and I think I just personally, there's just a piece of me that cares about the well-being of others, and I think that's a piece of it. But yeah, not having the support or not even having a program, and I don't even know that it wasn't support. We just didn't even know what we didn't know.
Sure.
Uh, like so, starting in 2010, a program that we had to build the policy on. We had to figure out what we're going to do and who was going to be on the team and why and how and it just getting through all of that and then dealing with the naysayers for so long because they never had it and they didn't think it was important. Why do we need this? This is stupid. Where today it's like it's normal. It's like, hey, we just had an incident last night. One of our sergeants had a personal incident, and it's like, hey, call peer support and have them geared up on it. It's like that would never have been a thing prior to 2010. And so because that culture has shifted to where that's the norm now, I think it's helpful. But yeah, it probably is. I mean, there probably does have a lot to do with it when I'm sitting here reflecting, like we didn't have it and we didn't have that support. So it's huge that we've shifted that way.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been doing this, I've been in the wellness space now for 8 years. And I I say this all the time because it's true. I think California really is ahead of the curve. Like you guys have had peer support and wellness programming years before a lot of other, states. And even still, there are a lot of states out there and agencies out there that don't have anything at all yet. And that they're really just trying to build something up. And so I do think that you having peer support and, kind of starting to establish a wellness program 15 years ago is, you know, years ahead of of a lot of other agencies. But I mean, I'm sure you can attest to this too. I would even say last 5 years, I feel like that momentum has really, really started to build and it is becoming more normal and it's also becoming expected. Like I think
Right.
that now it's, especially with new hires, I think there's an expectation that's put on agencies of, you know, of a certain level of care. That when new recruits come in, they're like, okay, what are you guys doing for me and my wellness? Do you see that? Do you see that new hires are asking for that or looking for that?
I think it's interesting because we don't necessarily say that. And you know what? That's not true. I just recently had some dispatcher candidates to ask about that.
Mhm.
So I do think that probably is something that they're hearing about it too out in the world. Like, hey, what do they have for wellness? That's becoming a normal conversation
Yeah.
where it wasn't before. So I think it's super important. Um, but having that built in and believing in it and forcing it is different. And so that's what's interesting now is people are just it's finally built in for us, like it's normal. But getting there has not been very easy either. That was very challenging to where now we have kids that are like, hey, I want to do this. This is cool. So
Yeah.
um, it is different.
It can be a slow moving ship
Oh, it
sometimes.
is. It
Like
is.
sometimes, like, and I referred to this too, and we talked about this, like you have over 200 employees. And so smaller agencies, if you have 10 people, I kind of think of that as like a sports car. Like you can kind of maneuver really quickly because it's smaller. And the larger the organization gets, the bigger that car, that boat, however you want to like picture it in your mind, and the harder it is to maneuver and the slower it goes. So I could see that, with over 200 employees, how that maybe takes a little bit more time to build things and get things off the ground. When it comes to organizational wellness, how important do you think it is to create a culture of wellness? And how important do you think it is for that to come from the top, from leadership?
I think that is critical. Um, it doesn't matter how much stuff you have if it's not believed in by the management, by the chief, by the captains, lieutenants, whatever your rank structure is. Because it doesn't matter if and I have just about every wellness program you can possibly have in a police department, probably. But if I sit here and blow it off and say, yeah, it's there if you need it, whatever. Then it becomes like it's really not that important. And more critical even than me is if our sergeants don't believe in it, because they are that first line supervision. So we really have to work down as chiefs to not just have it, but believe in it and create a culture that it matters in. And just for example, when we first started, we had to force people. We used to call it like for a critical incident debrief after a shooting or an OI or an officer involved shooting or something. We used to force them to go, and they would get mad, and we say, "Well, you don't have to participate, but you do have to show up," and we call it training. Because they're essentially training to gain coping mechanisms. And then once a few of those happen and people are like, oh, that actually was pretty helpful. That starts getting around, right? And it's super critical for a chief not just to have it, but believe in it and encourage it as well. And then same with command staff because every level they can go, oh, that guy's silly. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He'll be out of here in 2 or 3 years. We're going to stay at our old thought process. But then if you can get those sergeants to really buy in, or supervisors, I think that's the most critical because they have the most day-to-day influence on personnel. And so if they're like, hey, it sounds like you're having a rough time, why don't you go talk to restoration? Or why don't you get some counseling over this place? Or have you used EAP? If they're not making those connections in that culture, um, then it's for nothing, honestly. And then we just
What
have dogs running around in somebody's car for nothing. So
what is your secret to getting that buy-in from the sergeants or the supervisors? Is there something that you do internally that gets everyone kind of on that same page? Like what is the secret to that, if
I
there is
think
one?
I don't know if there is one. Time is one, but it's also we have to keep talking about it, right? We have to keep making it a normal conversation. It can't be hidden. Like for example, we have a very, very, very nice massage chair inside dispatch. And it rubbed some people wrong because I said that's only for dispatchers. I don't want anyone else going in there. Leave it for them. We have a separate one that's not quite as nice. It's not a Cadillac. It's more like whatever. It's definitely not a Cadillac.
Toyota
Yeah,
versus a
it's
Cadillac or
probably a
something.
Toyota compared to a Cadillac. But
Honda.
it works, right? And it
Yeah.
works. People can go in there and they can take off their gun belt and their vest and go sit in the chair. Um, but it's interesting because people get like jealous now, like, how come dispatch, man, we don't have that, right? How come we can't use that? And so I think sometimes just seeing like that take place is super helpful because then they start being involved, they start talking about it. And it becomes something like, oh man, I wish we had that. Um, but I think that's just going back, just go back to the question real quick because I know I kind of messed that up a little bit.
No, you didn't.
Uh,
You're good.
okay. I think just trying to shift that culture is like ways like that is just same with the dogs. We have two therapy dogs, and so one is actually in dispatch and one is in investigations, and it just happened that way because of where the handlers are that were peer support that applied for them. But it's the same thing. Like we bring the dogs around, people fall in love with them. Now they're a part of them, right? That's a part of their program. And so they start speaking towards we have therapy dogs and they're super cool and they'll do this and that. And so I think the more we can bring stuff around people is super important as well.
I love that. So, and I hope that I'm not going to butcher this, and I hope that I grasped this correctly, but it sounds like to me, it starts at the top where you, as the chief, not only are you excited about it, but you're not just throwing it in a closet or checking a box, like you're actually promoting these resources. And then the more you talk about it and the more you provide these resources, then the more excited that you're getting your sergeants and your supervisors. And then it just trickles down from there. And now everyone is like almost fighting over the resources because they're so good and they want it so much that now they want the same chair, they want another dog, and and it just kind of creates that culture, but it starts at the top and then it goes down from there.
And it helps too. Like we just did sergeant's testing. And so I'll make them read books. And one of them, it was Everybody Matters.
Mhm.
just talks about the value of the people and their concerns and being empathetic. Another one we just did is leadership. Um, and so similar, it talks about leadership, but it starts to talk more about focus on people.
Mhm.
And so if you can start to shift that mindset with our supervisors, that's all part of the wellness component. And I just did a PowerPoint for them too, which is creating a culture of care, um, which I made all of them sit through. And but we broke it down into tables and talked about our culture and talked about what does that even mean? What is care and why? And and it seems so simple, but to me, it hasn't been that simple. And being a POA or being a union rep for a long time, and then for both the police managers and police officers, I'd always hear, "Well, they don't care," and I was like, "What does that mean? Like, what
Mhm.
does they don't care mean? Like, we have all this stuff and programs and all that, but there's a feeling they don't have, and whatever that might be." So I recently did a class on creating a culture of care, and for me, what I've come up with is I believe it takes consistency as the C, and we need to be consistent as an organization, whether that's how we talk about things, how we talk about wellness, how we believe in wellness, how do we treat our staff, how do we enforce policy. Some things are equal, some things are equitable. What does that mean? And so to talk about that consistency on why this shift should be this way versus this way, and how we enforce things, and then accountability. I think people that come to work hard, they want others held accountable to also do the same. And so I think that shows that we care as well. Like I have 4 kids. They're no longer kids, they're all adults. And I love them equally across the board. And they all have to be held accountable differently because one, my oldest, he's stubborn as can be when he was young. So he took a little bit more, but my youngest daughter, I have twin girls, and the younger one, I can just look at and she would just melt, right? So um, that's where the equity comes, but the accountability is the same, and they have to be able to be held to, like, these are our standards. This is what we do. But then the next thing is recognition. And that was always a challenging one, at least in our department, because for years, um, we have not been a department that just hands out ribbons or medals. But we're also facing a time where a lot of the kids that we're growing up now are they receive trophies just for showing up, right? And so we have to find that balance of recognition. And I think everybody likes to be recognized. I mean, it doesn't matter which leadership book you read, whether it's Simon Sinek or whoever, right? They're going to tell you like people want to be recognized, and I think that's true. It doesn't mean you have to get an award, but just to say, hey, Paige, thank you for what you're doing. You're making a difference in law enforcement, right? That matters. It means something versus just not getting anything. And then the last thing is empathy, and I think that's super important. Is that we have to be empathetic to the needs of our staff. What do they need? Not what they want. What do they need? And I think there's a difference in that and getting to know their families and are they married, are they not married, or someone that when they come in having a bad day, like, hey, what's going on? Hey, my kid was up all night, they were throwing up, they were dealing with this. Okay, now I know they're tired because they're dealing with family things. So we should be able to have those relationships as our supervisors with our staff to know like what is happening in their lives, and do the personal lives crash with the professional lives, and how do we prevent that? And a lot of it is what I talk about going back to the accountability is what are we doing when we're seeing these caution signs and they just keep smashing caution signs? Are we going to let them drive off the cliff, or are we going to stop that,
Mhm.
um, and save their career and save themselves? Because that's just more stress, right, on the outside when they have to go through an internal affairs investigation, or they get disciplined or something. So how are we preventing it and getting ahead? So that's kind of a quick synopsis of it. But so I just talked a little bit about that, and I think that's important as we kind of create that culture of taking care of our people.
I love it. So, culture of care, consistency, accountability, recognition, and empathy.
and and
I love it. That's great. So we talked about creating a culture of wellness and how that starts at the top, what that looks like to care for your people, community support and how that impacts mental wellness. We talked about some of the things. So we talked about the why, and I know that you said that it doesn't matter what you have if you don't have that, culture first. But you do have a lot of things that you offer, and I want to highlight some of those things. We've talked about some of them already. We have, you have peer support, you have a Cadillac and a Honda, massage chair.
Great, great.
Um, we have you have a service dog, and just an in-house dog, right? You have an in-house dog and a service dog,
So we have two therapy dogs.
two therapy dogs.
One's in dispatch and one's in invest, but we use
Okay.
them for like any of the critical incident debriefs. They'll come in and sit there and the people can pet. The investigations one is actually pretty awesome because the handler that has that dog also happens to be in our special victims unit. So he's dealing with
Mm,
sexual assault crimes and domestic violence crimes. So it's almost twofold. Like we're getting to use it when we're in, talking to kids and things. So
yeah.
super important and they have that bond. But
Getting
yes, we
them
do have
to
the
open up,
dogs.
getting them to open up and feel comfortable and yeah. But some of the other things that you have too, you have nutrition, you offer prepackaged meals,
Yes.
correct? You have a gym, you have a quiet room. But one of the things that you said is that you have in-house therapy sessions, correct?
Yes. So we were working with a different group for a while. It didn't seem to work out. Um, and EAP, we found Employee Assistance Program, and the therapists in there just didn't fit first responders. Where there would be people that where the therapist probably needed more therapy after hearing our first responders talk than our first responders were getting. And so one of the therapists that were offering services in the program we were with prior to, someone I know, her her husband was, he still is, he retired from one agency and is now working again. A battalion chief for a fire department. Her son's a police officer. She's been dealing with the first responder market for a long time. Um, and so I was familiar with her and know what she is about. So I asked her if she'd be willing to just take us on as a client. And so we talked about it. We figured out how that would look, and so we will send people, and it's not even us sending. We will pay, is what I should say, for our staff to go, and they get 8 visits covered by that. And I have kind of a side deal with her that if someone needs more and her therapist comes to her and says, "Hey, so and so needs more time. We need a few more sessions," then they don't have to ask us permission. They don't have to tell us who it is. It's totally confidential. We don't know when they go see them. We don't know why they're seeing them. And quite frankly, I don't care why they're seeing them as long as they're
Mhm.
getting the help they need. And if there's an extension, then she just contacts our peer support staff and says, "Hey, we're going to need to extend a case longer." They don't share the name or anything. So that's been super helpful, I think, and a lot of people use that service right now. And it's amazing because it's not just for stuff on the job, but it's stuff off the job. And remember, I talked a little bit earlier about sometimes our personal lives crash and
Mhm.
collide into our professional lives, and both affect each other. And so, if we can help them with their personal life issue that will help them be a better employee, then that's a win for us. And so we do that in-house. We pay for that. It's separate from EAP programs. It's separate from workman's comp. But because it's been so successful, our workman's comp now is also using them, because what's special about them to me is they are about building resiliency and giving our staff coping mechanisms to deal with what's in front of them.
Mhm.
Where what we have started to find is there's several people out there that are just telling people, "Hey, just get out of the business." Well, in California, it's not hard to collect an industrial retirement because it's automatically assumed that you'll have some type of mental health stress. And so it's a problem that a lot of chiefs are dealing with right now because people are just going out and we're not getting them back. And so um, it's something I've heard from several colleagues about, and it's challenging to deal with. It's frustrating because there are things they shouldn't. No human should see some of the stuff our cops see and all the cops see. However, um, we have to, right? And so we need to get them to be able to respond and take care of themselves and battle back from that versus just retire out and go find something else to do. So that's one thing I truly appreciate. I'll just throw a plug for its restoration counseling services in Vacaville, California. And she does an amazing job. And she's expanded to like Monterey County, up by Sacramento County, I think even up in Eureka, um, so Humboldt County. So she's actually really pushing out, and but she's getting therapists that are um, tested, first responder tested, and I think that's a big difference too. Is like it kind of goes back to being supportive and not just having a program, but believing in the program. This is the same type of thing. You can send anybody to therapy, but if it's not going to be successful and they're not teaching or talking about the right stuff, it's going to just crash and burn for us. So
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you say that because I have never heard that before, that therapists are encouraging people to just leave the job instead of trying to give them the tools and resources to be able to process those things and, like you said, kind of get back into the fight and have that resiliency to go back in the field. They're just like, yeah, just collect a retirement and leave. That's very interesting to me because I've never heard that before. And that is such a disservice. That is not what you want. And obviously, maybe there are some people who that's what they need. And
correct, correct.
maybe they don't have the ability to go back. And I think that that is addressed case by case, obviously, but to have someone who maybe doesn't have the tools and resources to be able to help someone to get back on the job and their go-to is just like, yeah, just leave is so interesting to me. And I also have heard, through various leaders that EAP is something that a lot of people are not having the most positive experiences with, that there's some distrust, that it's really hard to get to a therapist. If you do get to one, usually you don't have the same one multiple times, so you're kind of having to repeat yourself. And so I think it's great that you recognized those challenges and you found someone who is reputable, who has the skill set to be able to, speak to and help this particular community. And it sounds like she's doing great things and she's vetting the people who she is now hiring under her to take that.
Absolutely, and it's so critical. And you're right. It's crazy that they and don't get me wrong. I want to be clear. I think there are. I agree with you. I think there's people that like you've had enough in this job. Thank you for your service. God bless you. We hope you don't have any more trauma from this.
Mhm.
Please take your retirement and go so that you can enjoy your family life and enjoy the rest of your life. But I think there's some too, but sometimes uh, we could do more to get them and to be in a better place. And we made it super simple for them to just walk away. And when a counselor is saying, "Oh yeah, they should go," versus giving them coping mechanisms to get through the next day, to get through the next week, the next month, year, your career, and that's your ultimate goal is to retire with your and throughout your career. So
Well, and
it's challenging.
I think too, it's like one, like you do want to retire and have life. You want to have many years after retirement and have that longevity. But regardless if someone is leaving now or not, you still have to have those tools to be able to cope and to process and to heal and to thrive. And so it's your job, regardless if they're retiring now or later, to equip them with those tools instead of just like kicking them out the door and being like, peace out, So that's really
Exactly.
interesting.
No, you're
Yeah.
100% right because they're going to still deal with the same challenges, the same nightmares, the same flashbacks, the same. everything that comes up, right? And so, and I think that speaks to, unfortunately, and sadly, the amount of people that end up committing suicide when they retire. So
Yeah.
um, it's critical that we get them those coping mechanisms, ideas of, hey, try this, and everything's different for everybody. Right?
Mhm.
Something might be great for you that may not be great for me, but the more we can put in front of them to take hold of, that's super helpful.
I agree. And I talk about this a lot. And I was talking about this earlier too. Like I always would call it the charcuterie board, where you have lots of different options. And I had someone at, I don't want to say it was a Cal Chief conference because it could have been any first responder conference, but for the sake of talking to you, maybe it was in California, who knows? But someone said, that charcuterie was too hard for people to say. And so they're like, you have to say the buffet. So charcuterie buffet, whatever, it's the same thing, having lots of different options that you can sample. And maybe one thing's not for someone, but it is for somebody else. And so everyone feels like there's something for them. Um, when it comes to building a wellness program, and I know we're kind of reaching the end of our conversation, it went by so fast. As a chief, putting together a wellness program, how do you know where to spend the money, what to do, what to get? There are a lot of agencies that I talk to that just don't even know where to start. And when they do find things that they, maybe want to implement, they have challenges with finding funding, and incorporating that into their budget. What are some pieces of advice that you might give to other leaders when it comes to creating a wellness program that has all those different things, where to start and how to do it?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece is, what do you need first, right? Do a needs assessment. What do you have? What do you need? What would be helpful for your organization? What is it missing? And I think that's the first step. But and I'll kick it back to community again, for especially some of the smaller departments that they don't have the income or the money sources, or the resources to do that. Um, like maybe a thing like a massage chair is important. Maybe it's not, but maybe someone can donate that from the community towards POA or something for officer wellness. I think we just have to start thinking differently, right? And just to say, man, I just don't have the money for this. Well, even peer support, team up, do it regionally. We had an incident occur in a city next to us. They hadn't developed a peer support team yet. This was many years ago. So we went over and helped them out, right? So maybe regionalizing some things. And I think we have to start seeing more regionalization happening, to help each other out. But then you have to build those relationships. So you have to do stuff together. Peer support to me is not that expensive. I mean, you send somebody to school, you have some additional training. Some of these places will do trainings fairly inexpensive. You can partner with your community, see if there's a good counseling group that is already there, that works with first responders. I think there's a lot that can be done. We just did a thing right now called the Office Dog in our sheriff's department. They have the animal shelter, and so they bring a dog in on Wednesdays through all their county building, and then we've expanded it. And just to see how people respond, and even including myself, because you can't get mad at a little puppy, right, or a dog. It just wants to be adopted. And so, but to see what that does for their body and their cortisol and everything else, it just, for those few minutes, it takes it away. So it doesn't have to be this robust program. Um, and I would be happy. Someone wants to call me and ask. I can say, hey, this is what we did. This is how we started. I will share everything that I have with any chief in the nation. Um, and a lot of the stuff hasn't cost us a lot of money. It costs them continually. Like even the dog program, that's a whole different facility that does it. And so the dogs are still technically owned by the other facility. So yeah, it costs us dog food and vet bills and things, but there are charities out there that would be willing to raise money. And so I think that's where that, again, going back to the community, it's super important to have those relationships because you never know what's out there that would donate as well. um, to making their police department healthier and better. And like we do a program with Grub Box, and where you're talking about the food, and it's like
Mhm.
the staff pay for the food, the company brings in a refrigerator, and they give us a 25% discount because there's a lot of big orders. And it's a healthier opportunity of buying food than going to Jack in the Box or McDonald's or something, right? And so not everything costs money. The gym programs, we got a grant for our wellness program for to write a grant to bring in more weight equipment and different fitness equipment. And that also we were able to send a few of our officers to instructor schools so they can help teach people to do it the right way. We have the yoga program. So yeah, it costs some money, but we wrote a grant for that too. So there's funding out there too if we just look for it. But we have to have the desire to have it, and it has to be supported. Um, I think that's the most critical thing for me is that it doesn't matter what you have if you don't believe in it. If you don't believe in the validity to it, it's like saying charcuterie, apparently.
100%.
So if you as the chief, you as a command group don't believe in what you have, it doesn't matter what you have. I mean, you can have all the programs in the world, but if you don't believe it, no one else will either. So, but I think there's ways to figure out what do you need as an organization, what's missing. Start with the basics. We started with the basics of peer support, critical incident debriefs, defusings, which are a little less than a critical incident debrief, and dealing with it right after the fact, and making that a part of the culture. So now we're talking, right? And then we opened up some other stuff, and there might be some groups that will take EAP therapists out there. And so we just got to figure out what it takes work. Work doesn't cost us money. Um, it's just the desire to get it done. But I would be happy to share with anybody what we're doing, where we got grants, who we're working with. You're welcome to send out my email to everybody. I don't know how this works, but so I would be more than happy to help any organization out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I can put your email in the description of the podcast. So anyone who's listening to it, if they want to reach out, they can have your email
Awesome.
there, or I can put my email and they can just reach out to me. So maybe you don't get inundated and I do instead. Maybe we'll do something
I
like that.
I don't care
Um,
either way. If we're helping people get better, that's awesome. So.
Cool. And I appreciate that advice because it honestly did make it seem attainable. I think sometimes when we think about wellness, especially when we start talking about the charcuterie board or the buffet and like all the things that you have to do, it becomes overwhelming. But everything that you just explained felt attainable, and realistic. And I do think that it's important to remember that there are people out there who have done it. And I can't imagine one person who, like, if an agency reached out to them saying, "Hey, like, I heard you have a really good wellness program. Could you point me in the right direction? Or could you explain how I did it?" I can't imagine any agency that would be like, "No, like
No,
I'm not gonna do that. Like you're on your own, dude, you know." So I think remembering that, because I think sometimes you do feel like you're on your own little island, and remembering like there are other people out there in your state or in other states who are valuable resources for you that are willing to just give you everything because we want everyone to succeed. So
yeah.
I appreciate you offering that, and I'll make sure that your email is in there for anyone who's interested.
Well, just to that point, really quick, everywhere IACP for us and Cal Chiefs. I know Arizona has their own chief group, and but there's so much organizations out there. Like I went to Commanders, basically a conference for commanders with peer support stuff, and it was in Oklahoma,
Mhm.
and that group partners with the Arizona group, and they're going around and doing a lot of these programs for commanders because who talks to them? And I know like California, they started peer support for chiefs with their wellness group, and because who's talking to the chiefs? Who are the chiefs talking to?
Mhm.
So I think there's plenty of organizations out there who are willing to help. Um, but yeah, definitely, it's out there, and it doesn't always cost money, right? And so I think we get lost sometimes in that. And I would argue with anybody, city manager, city council, what is the true, just because we can't show a number of what we're saving, a true money savings, um, sometimes we have to invest a little bit more in the wellness of our staff. And that needs to become a line item for certain organizations too. So,
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Last question for you.
all right,
You ready?
I'm ready.
No, it's not bad. Um, what words of advice would you give to someone who's earlier in their career? Someone, who maybe is brand new in this profession or someone who's trying to climb the ranks when it comes to wellness, something that you wish you would have known earlier in your career, or maybe a piece of advice that really helped you in your career. What words of wisdom would you share?
It's funny, my daughter's boyfriend works for Yavapai County and just started his career, and we just had that conversation. And I'm a big fan of emotional survival for law enforcement. In fact, I gave him and her a copy and said, "Hey, read this, understand what you're going to be going through." Really, a lot of the stuff we just talked about, like stay grounded, right? Have friends outside the business, do your normal stuff. Don't work a ton of overtime to where this job becomes your life. Make it a career, but don't get crazy. And so you see a lot of that where people work too much. And so keep your hobbies. Don't let your hobbies become, oh, I got to work Saturday on overtime because I might miss something. That same stuff on Friday will be there next week too, or Saturday, whatever. So you don't go home. It's okay. Because people get sucked into the money, they get sucked into the adrenaline junkie drive,
Mhm.
uh, and just remember who you are. Don't lose sight of who you are. Don't confuse who you are with what you are. And I think that's always a struggle for people is they get lost in what I am versus who I am. And
Mhm.
so stay grounded. Remember who you are. Keep your friends. Keep your focus. Keep your family. All right, and keep your hobbies. I think that is so critical going in. And to your point, when you asked, so how'd you guys survive? And I think I was able to do a lot of that and just didn't even know at the time what I was doing. But now looking back, I was like, thank God I had 4 kids that kept me busy. Because who knows where I'd be right now, right? So
Right.
uh, that's probably the best advice I can give to a brand new person.
I love that advice. That is great advice. I wrote it down. I love the remember who you are, not what you are. Stay
And,
grounded. Yeah.
and the only other thing to add to that, I tell every new hire, remember why you choose this job and why you're doing it too, right? It's because that helps with the wellness later on. But
Yeah.
that's the best advice I can give to a brand new person.
That's great. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time and all of your insights. And I know we went a little bit long, but thank you so much for being here. I really, really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. Like I said, I do remember meeting you, and you started with the yoga stuff that I remember.
Mhm.
And so now to know you're doing podcasts and stuff, I'm gonna be following. I did not know, so now I know. So I will spread that around. That's awesome.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for what you do for law enforcement because you don't have to, and so it is very appreciated.
Thank you. I appreciate the recognition
Ah,
piece of it that it honestly does matter. And you talked about this earlier, and it does make a difference. And you don't always get that feedback. And when
no,
you do something in service of others, because I do believe that that's what I do too, in a different way, obviously, but like I do this because I love it, because I want to, because I want to help people. And a lot of times you don't get that direct feedback of, someone saying thank you. And so I do appreciate that. And I do agree with you that every once in a while, doesn't have to happen 24/7, but every once in a while, it's nice to hear a thank you or a good job. So I do appreciate you saying that very much. And
of course,
um,
and I totally appreciate what you're doing. That's awesome.
thank
So
you. Well, thank you for your time. And yeah, let's keep in touch.
thank you.